We're live. Welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another self-isolation stream. Isolating together, we got a great guest on the program. But first, let us welcome you. Let's kick it off. Woo! Yeah. Oh, what's going on? Oh, no. Woo! Woo! Let's see. Woo! Woo! Yeah. Rocket. Oh yeah. Who we got in the stream today? Shout out where you're from. Let me know. Oh, let's sing. Welcome. We're gonna welcome you to the stream now. Welcome. We're gonna welcome you to the stream now. Welcome. We're gonna welcome you to the stream now. Welcome. Oh. We're gonna welcome you to the stream now. Oh yeah. Let's see who we got. Who we got in the chat? We got people from all over the world today. We got Missouri, Carrie Andrews from Missouri, USA. We got people excited for Sally LePage. My name is Daniel, says Daniel. We got Czech Republic. We got people here from California, Germany, more California, Northern Virginia, France. I love trains. That's not a place. We got UK. Hey, still here, Lucille. Can you check out my YouTube channel, JM? Maybe I'll check out your YouTube channel later. Greetings from Constance. We got people from Chechnya, from Poland, Washington State, Hamburg, Germany. Hello from Czech Republic. Souk, Canada, fellow Canadian. Hello, Kate Woods. We got people from Finland, from Golden, Colorado. Golden, all right. Hello, Iwa. Oh, we got people who know each other in the chat now. Sweet. People from New Jersey. Hello, Christoph. Oh, so sweet. Bonds forming in the chat. Such a beautiful community coming together. Welcome all of you. We got a very special guest today. A person who is a doctor of evolution and sex and the behavior of flies, I think, and brilliant science communicator. Now doing that full time, I believe. Welcome to the program, Sally LePage, everybody. Welcome.
Hello.
We're gonna welcome you to the stream now. Welcome.
This is so creepy. I love it.
We're gonna welcome you to the stream now. Welcome, Sally.
I've never had a musical intro like that before. This is great.
Well, I mean, you like your musical intros, right? I watched your Royal Institute lecture.
Yes, I was thinking that's probably my biggest musical intro. I just wanted a big entrance, you know.
You was it like when you did that, because you had little musical segments? Were those all songs that like you just popped off the top of your head, or did you put a lot of thought into like, okay?
They
like,
were all related to that part of the talk.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, like, are you a Good Charlotte fan deep in your bones?
Oh, no. Who's Good Charlotte?
Because girls don't like boys, girls like cars and money.
No.
No.
I've done an awful lot of searching for kind of songs about various bits of relationships. In fact, when I was a PhD student, the university department asked if they could take us from Oxford to a karaoke bar in London, because there aren't any decent karaoke bars in Oxford, so they could record a podcast. So basically, out there on the internet somewhere is my lab in a karaoke bar in London doing karaoke to songs that vaguely reflect what we talk about.
That sounds like one of those ideas that's like, I don't know, maybe good in somebody's head. I don't know, like, did it work out? Have you ever listened back to it and decided what you thought?
I mean, none of us are particularly good singers, except my old supervisor, who is a singer in a band.
All right.
But I mean, it was a novel way of approaching our science.
Yeah, like, I don't know, are biologists musical folks? Because I felt like there was a weird overlap in physics of like, half the people who are in my grad program were like, I actually secretly write symphonies, or like, I play in a blues band. It was odd.
Wow. I think scientists in general are quite musical.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us come from backgrounds. So certainly for me, so I play clarinet and piano.
Ooh.
Neither of them really anymore, but I learned them from the age 6 to 17.
Which
So
which
I got
one were
pretty good.
like? Did you have one that was your main, or were they kind of like
Clarinet,
complementary?
by
Okay.
far and away clarinet. I've never, I mean, I got to grade 8 on piano, but I was never good at it, I would say.
I mean,
Um,
I think that's further than I ever got in piano. Like I think I did like 1 year of formal lessons, and that was the
yeah.
year when I quit piano. Like I had lots of
Oh,
lessons, but like never people trying to put me through the grade system or like give me like worksheets and stuff. And as soon as I
yeah. So
got that,
I'm
I was like,
so
no.
jealous of you being able to play things by ear and compose stuff. Because to me, I very much was classically trained. So I
Mm,
can play things that other people have written exactly how they have written it and no deviation
yeah,
whatsoever.
yeah. And
Um,
it's like weird how often like I don't know. There must be people who can do both, but a lot of the time when I meet people who are like who've gone through the entire like grade thing for piano or whatever, they have like they're missing that jamming like fun sense of music.
yes.
Like even if
Because
they
I
enjoy
have
it.
a very strong idea of what is right and what is wrong,
Mm,
because there are wrong notes when you're playing someone else's piece.
yes.
And so it puts an awful lot of pressure on you when you start improvising,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're like, oh, that does not sound good.
And you're comparing it to like all these great works that you've mastered and you can play
What do you
perfectly.
mean I don't sound like Chopin right away?
Whereas
God.
I have never played Chopin. I cannot play Chopin.
Oh, it's
I'm
lovely.
I mean,
Oh,
yeah.
I
I
do love romantic music. I love a bit of cheese in my music. But no, I was very much a clarinetist. It's the more
hmm.
sociable of the instruments.
What are like
Um,
what are the great composers for clarinet?
Mozart
Oh,
is the
really?
key one.
Okay.
But then, so he wrote so the clarinet's actually quite a recent instrument. It was
Hmm.
invented in the 1700s. So late classic, there isn't any clarinet music before late classical
Okay.
because it just wasn't invented. So Mozart was the big guy. He loved it. He said that the clarinet was the closest instrument to the human voice sound. So he wrote,
I would believe that. I mean, I could make an
it's
argument
between that
for
and cello.
yeah, cellos and violas.
Yeah,
But
and so the cello and the clarinet have pretty much the exact same range,
mm,
and they're actually quite similar instruments.
really,
Obviously,
I didn't realize
not
the clarinet can go
in
that far down.
yeah.
Okay.
Go to a low E certainly.
This that one down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so yeah, and so Mozart wrote clarinet concerto, clarinet quintet, whole bunch of things, and then it really gets juicy in the Romantic era, where
Okay.
you've got like Saint-Saëns and Brahms. Brahms wrote 2 concertos, and yeah, oh, Spohr and Schumann wrote some amazing stuff. But yeah, so it's more of an orchestral instrument, and I
Yeah.
very much enjoy playing as part of an orchestra. Not that I do that anymore since leaving
You were
university.
in an orchestra at one point?
Yeah, all the way through school, and
Okay.
then I kind of gave up music as an undergrad because my school life was entirely. I was in every single club you could be in. So
Wow.
I was in the orchestra that was joint with the boys' school because I went to a girls' school, the wind orchestra, and then the 2 choirs. So it was like every single time that I could be doing a music activity, I was. But then I kind of gave it up for undergrad, tried some different things, and then as a graduate, I joined the university orchestra, the Oxford University Philharmonia. We just called it OU-Phil. I can never remember.
Okay.
One of them is the professional one, and one of them is the not professional one. We were the not professional one.
Ah, all right. So there's like the music students one, and then the like
Oh,
people.
kind of, yeah. So there's OUO, which is the main orchestra. But the trouble with playing a wind instrument is you've got to be the top 2 in the university if you want to be in the top orchestra, because there are
Okay.
only 2 of your instrument. It's not
Wow.
like violin where
Yeah, you
you
can have as
just
many
have to be in the
strings as
top
you want.
7, top 20, and you're in the top orchestra. No, for a wind instrument, if you're in the top 2, you're in the main orchestra. If you're then 3rd or 4th, you're in the next one down. So that was mine. And then everyone else has to join a wind orchestra, otherwise they don't get to play.
Okay. Yeah, I have no sense of how that those proportions of orchestra got like worked out. Do you who codified here's the optimal balance of all these different instruments?
Well, in part, it's because the strings have quite a weak sound. And so you physically need more of them to have this balanced sound. And I suppose also historically, an orchestra started off as a string orchestra.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
by and large, the majority of the wind instruments are much later.
Yeah.
And all the composers prefer the strings, and all the conductors come from the string section. And there is no
They're just
rivalry at all between the string
Have
section
you
and the
ever
wind
seen string
section.
players move
They're
around? when
bloody
they're really into it? It's
prima
like nothing else.
donnas. Oh, they always get the melody. It's like the sopranos in a SATV choir.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they always get the melody, and
That's-
everyone else kind of hates them for it.
I mean, I'm in a tenor in the choir that I'm in.
Oh,
which is,
okay.
Which
So
is
you also
canceled out right now. We're gonna do a concert of like 4 small Bach masses at the end of April, and that is no longer going to happen. That's
Oh.
dead. But we get to sit behind the altos and like shout in their ears, which is really fun. You know, you get some nice like I feel like the tenors are the equivalent of like the trumpet French horn sort of section in like an orchestra where like
or maybe
you're-
the flutes.
yeah
the
like
flutes
like you're
and the trumpet
you're
get
not
the
usually the
solos.
lead, but when you are, you're like like,
Oh yeah.
there's gonna be power, like especially if you're doing like Beethoven or I don't know.
Well, the trouble with the wind section is we sit right in front of the timpanis and the percussion. So I literally have to wear earplugs to concerts because when we're in our proper seating arrangements, it is deafening having the percussion right behind you.
You can really feel it though. You can get it.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
in your
Oh,
body.
totally.
Mm.
And I was very lucky that our concerts were in the Sheldonian Theatre, which is this beautiful small theatre in Oxford where the ceiling was designed by Christopher Wren.
Okay.
He's a very famous
Who's
architect.
Christopher Wren?
He is a very famous architect. He managed to get the theatre, so the roof of the ceiling of the theatre, so that there's no supporting beams in the way because it's all painted like the Sistine Chapel. So you've got these amazing like gods and angels and people on the ceiling, but it's a huge flat ceiling with no struts or anything holding it up from the underside. It's all happening on the top. So he invented that.
It's
And
like
he invented loads of other things.
It's held up somehow. Like is it like a dome sort of like the old style like church domes or?
So the very top of it is domed, yes. But the ceiling itself to the main theatre, because you can climb up, which is really cool. So you can climb on top of the ceiling.
Oh.
But the ceiling itself is completely flat, which was a big deal in his day. I'm trying to think what else. I think he might have designed St. Paul's Cathedral. I'm going to have a look.
Yeah,
he is like the #1 architect when it comes to British art. Yeah, he redesigned St. Paul's Cathedral after after the Fire of London. So he designed most of London after it was all burnt down.
Just like London's gone, we're gonna go get this one guy.
Basically, yeah, because so much of London burned.
Jeez.
And now there are these sight lines. So still in London today, there are these routes that cannot be built upon because if they would block the view of St. Paul's Cathedral from a certain spot.
Right, I've heard about that. That's why the Shard is the shape it is, right? Because
I'm not sure if it's the Shard or different ones, but you've got to have a clear view.
You've got to be able to see that. Why is that so important to people to like?
It's
see
just
it's
written into the rules of London. It's written into the planning code.
That makes like there's things like that in Montreal because Montreal's named after Mont Royal. It's like on a mountain, right? And so
that makes a lot of sense. I never realized that, but it makes a lot of sense.
And at the top of the mountain, there's a big cross that like is like lit up, and well, now it's lit up. It probably wasn't back in the day, and back in the day, I'm sure it was made of wood or whatever. But now it's like steel struts,
like Rio de Janeiro style.
Yeah, but there's a law on the books that there can be. Like, it's not that you have to see the cross, but it has to be the tallest place on the island. So there's like all the skyscrapers.
Is Montreal on an island? I know nothing about Canada.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of. I mean, I think of Montreal as kind of like a fake island because it's not like there's a lake and there's a body of water coming up. It's like the river forked and went around and then came back. So it's it's that kind of island. So it's like you wouldn't be able to tell you're on an island when you're in most places in Montreal. But yeah.
Yeah. Where is it? West Coast.
East Coast.
East Coast.
Yeah, close to. So we're basically like, I don't know. I guess we're like 5 hours north of Boston. I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
So like
And
we're
fairly
not
close to the border?
like yeah, we're about an hour drive from the U.S. border. So like
Okay.
directly south of us is like, um, yeah, like Vermont, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York. There's a few states because the states are a lot smaller than the province of Quebec.
Okay. And are
But yeah,
you in one of the Francophonie areas?
so Montreal is really mixed. It's like of all the places in Canada, I would say that it's the one that has like the most, like pretty much everyone is passable in both French and English. But
Okay.
then it kind of breaks down by neighborhood as well. And
Yeah.
my neighborhood it's a fairly anglophone neighborhood. It's got a very French name. It's called Notre Dame de Grâce, which is Our Lady of Grace. But
Oh, I thought you were going to say it's Fat Notre Dame.
Fat Notre Dame. No, there are some shops and stuff that have puns based on Notre Dame of various other things, like
Yeah.
Our Lady of Beef or
I
whatever.
see.
But it's sort of this neighborhood it seems like English students after they're done being students will like end up here. I don't know. The city sort of segments off.
Interesting.
I don't know.
I am very jealous of bilingual people because as a Brit, French is most of us. Like, if you're a native English speaker, then mostly you learn French as your second language in school. But I do not have enough to have a decent conversation in French.
Ok, on pourrait essayer si tu veux.
Oh no. The worst thing is that because I have such a limited vocabulary, I can usually work out a way of structuring a sentence or changing out words so that I can say what I need to say. If anyone says anything else back to me, I'm hopeless.
Okay, I'm good with comprehension. Like, I think I have all the vocabulary for recognizing it. I just don't have the connections between the thoughts and the words to generate it a lot of the time. Like, especially in like scientific contexts. Like,
I am in awe of people that do science in a second language. Like people who have to write papers in not their native tongue. It's insane.
Well, the weird thing is that like people who learn science in a second language often have a lot of trouble doing it in their primary language because it's just it's like region specific.
It's its own like science is its own language. Let's be honest, for a lot of the time.
Learn it either way. We had some people in the chat for a while were saying all the instruments that they're playing, so you can keep that going. We have violins.
The clarinetist app.
I don't know if we have a lot of violins.
Of course.
Shamil learned violins.
They get everywhere.
Tom Carter says cries in piano. I don't know what that was referring to. This is such a posh discussion. I love it. Do you get a lot of accusations of being posh?
Oh, all the time. I have a posh accent and I went to Oxford. So.
Okay, can you like define posh for me? Like, is it just upper class or like the upper class sensibility, or does it have like a more particular definition?
So Brits have a very strong awareness of the class system.
Okay.
I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in a way that the USA has a very strong awareness of race.
Right.
Like there are so many things that are tied to that. In the UK, so many things are tied to being upper middle or working class.
Okay.
And so posh is things to do with the higher classes. So the middle class could be posh to the working class.
Okay.
And the upper class are posh to the middle class.
Okay.
So it's about money and land and things that people with those tend to do. So, for example, there are supermarkets that are posh compared to other ones because, like, Waitrose and M&S sell fancier food. They're the sort of people where their essential range includes champagne flutes and quinoa and quince jelly.
What's a champagne flute?
It's the glass that you drink champagne out of.
Oh, it's just that's all it is?
That shape is a flute.
Okay.
As opposed to a coupe, which is kind of your martini, no, not quite your martini glass, a cocktail glass, which is shaped after Marie Antoinette's boob.
I have heard of this.
So various different glasses. So champagne flutes is the thing.
Wait, the martini glass is shaped after Marie Antoinette's
No, so
boob,
a
the
coupe
round one?
is more round, whereas a martini glass is more shaped like that.
That's like Madonna's boob. I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And so like a posh accent is one that So in the UK, it will be typically received pronunciation. So
Yeah.
RP, your standard English accent. I say standard just because it covers such a large area of the country. Tend to enunciate consonants. Say R instead of A in
Aw
for
instead
A.
of at,
So
like in
so
what?
bath instead of bath, dance
Oh,
instead of dance,
okay.
grass, all of
Grass,
those kind of words.
grass. But there's so many accents in the UK. Like,
There are, and even more so the further north you get. So the south of England has less regional variety, but the north of England, oh my God, like different sides of the same city can sound in like completely different from each other.
yeah, like it must be something to do with none of the languages commonly spoken in Canada were birthed in Canada, right?
Yeah.
And so it must be something like that. I'm not sure, but like the UK is the place where English has formed, and it's formed in all these separate little pockets that yeah, like we
But
got
yeah,
one expert.
I mean, there was obviously we're an old country, certainly by North American standards. So these towns have been separate towns for 1,000 years, say. And so there has been time, and during that time, there would have been very little migration in the same way that we see today.
Not a lot
So
of
you would have
mass
stuck.
media.
Exactly. So you would have stuck to your own area a lot more, and so maybe that's why I'm not a linguist, but I do find it fascinating.
Well, also, like I think, I mean, I'm not a linguist either. My sister did a couple linguistics classes, and I like to geek out about it. But
I didn't know you had a sister.
Yeah, I have an older sister and an even older brother. My brother's 5 years older than me. My sister is 2.5 and lives right across the street. And I've been taking care of her 2 little kids a lot during this whole quarantine situation because they like all the daycares are closed, so they're just at home all the time. And
I should point out to the chat that whilst we have known of each other for a while, this is our first time actually chatting. Real life conversation.
This is an intro in front of your eyes, so we'll hope it doesn't crash in flame at any point. Let's see. But
what's the state of lockdown in Canada then? Are you allowed to go and see your family?
Yeah, like there's no, it's not like a shelter in place, like stay in your home. It's like like Quebec especially, which is the French province of Canada. Like we acted earlier than most people.
Okay.
In North America, anyways. I mean, we could have acted earlier as well, and also we could have acted more effectively because our healthcare system is kind of it was shaky before this, and so I think Quebec recognized like if this gets bad, we are going to be really bad off, right? And so and they're also like, I don't know, Quebecers are always a little more skittish and afraid of things than the rest of the country, and I think like so it leads to Quebec being more afraid of like immigration and more xenophobic and stuff in regular.
Do you think
times.
Part of that is because they are the French region within an English-speaking country?
Totally. It's because they have a long history of like centuries previously of having been the culture that like the English were trying to get rid of and stamp out, and they like shipped a bunch of them out to Louisiana and whatever else.
Yeah.
And so like now there's this real defensiveness of like, this is our place we fought for. It's our culture. We want to keep it. Like we have lots of social programs, but we want to keep them for ourselves and all that. And it's like, it's more isolating, not so much in Montreal. Montreal is like a big melting pot because it's a city and all cities are like that. But generally the rest of Quebec, but like in a pandemic, that serves you a lot better, right? To be afraid of
to be isolated.
And to, be very willing to close down your borders and stay away from.
And everybody. I mean, as a country, you will have a much lower population density.
Yeah.
So it should be a lot easier for you to contain the spread.
Yeah, like
demographically.
But this, like the island of Montreal, is now locked off. Like you can't. All the bridges are closed. You can't get. I can't go and see my parents if I wanted to, who live off the island. Not that I would, but. Yeah, so we're the hot spot in Canada is this city right here. Well,
I'm in London, so we are apparently weeks ahead of the rest of the UK, as is to be expected.
Yeah, no, like cities are the prime spot for epidemics, right?
and London especially. I was surprised actually how long it took for them to get to London. But then once it hit, it surely didn't waste its time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a delay on like when you think it's there versus when it's actually there. You know, it's usually a couple weeks before you know about it, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, so like right now in London, what's your like day to day?
So the entire country is in lockdown.
Okay.
Nothing has been London specific.
Mm.
So the entire country, you are only allowed outside for buying food and essential supplies, buying medicine, going to your job if it's impossible to do your job at home, and you're basically if you're one of the essential workers.
Yeah.
And one form of daily exercise is permitted, and there's been lots of so basically I'm allowed to go out to the park as long as we then keep 2 meters apart from everybody. I'm allowed to go out to the shops as long as, but there are now queues outside the shops to space people out and that there aren't so many people in at one time. Public transport's pretty much, I mean, it's running for the essential workers. Like most NHS staff will need public transport to get to work. But pretty much you're in your house unless you have a very good reason to be out of your house.
Yeah, it's basically the same here. Like all the non-essential businesses are closed. You know, everything is canceled. Although not entirely closed. Like there's this croissant shop like right down the street from us, and it's open. But it's like all of
what
the tables
Canadian
are.
croissants like?
I don't think I've experienced any other kind of like. This is
Have you never been to France?
This is a good croissant shop. Like the croissants in this shop are light years ahead of the croissants like in the grocery stores.
Oh yeah.
So I would.
Do you call them croissants or croissants?
I call them croissants. With the r, because I don't know. But I still put the T at the end. It's sort of like a weird hybrid. Like it's like croissants. I think.
Yeah.
What do you say?
I think in Britain we just call them croissants.
Croissants, like with a W.
Because we're so used to, because obviously we wouldn't say croissant because that's just wrong.
Crescents.
But it sounds really ostentatious and flamboyant to put the French R in because it doesn't exist in English. And so, I mean, you could say croissant.
I understand
that. That just sounds like super out of place. That's like, oh, and I would like a tortilla today. And it's just like
huevos rancheros.
Like, exactly. So obviously the is closest to the w sound for us. So we would say croissant.
Yeah, like we have so many like French words that have like, I mean, all of English does, but we have way more in here that are just like part of English speech. Like our like little corner stores are called Deps, which is short for dépanneur, which is an English bastardization of dépanneur, which means like to get you out of something, something that you're out of, like replenish you, dépanner. But we just say I'm going down to the Dep.
Yeah. Well,
like,
I mean, it's weird how most of the modern words, so things like to do with the internet or technology or whatever, in French, like France French, are just straight English. Like they don't even try to francisize it.
Yeah, there's actually more of that here than there is in France, which I think is another aspect of the way that the French here are really trying to preserve their thing. Like we have laws about your signs on your restaurants, like they have to have French language first in a certain size, and then like if there's another text, it has to be like half the size.
We have that in Wales. So Wales is a bilingual country by law. Even though previously very few people spoke Welsh. Now there's a resurgence of it. It's now being taught in schools. But it is great because Welsh is a bonkers language. Like the amount of consonants that they use is ridiculous. And so it just means that when you're driving through Wales, all of the signs are written in Welsh and English. But you have no idea how to pronounce them because the Welsh alphabet has more to it than the English alphabet. So like they've got a double L and a double D and various other things. So it just comes up with really weird stuff.
That's the one like that like longest name in the world or whatever? Is that a Welsh name?
So Llanfair PG is the short way of describing it. It's based. I mean, it's a bit of a cheat.
It was like a publicity stunt, right? To like rename
because the town name basically translates to the town next to the red church on the hill where the wood grows, but not that wood, the other one with the river running through it, and my old Paul lives around the corner. If you were to then squash that into one word, that's what they've done.
So Welsh has generally that capability. It's like German. You can just like keep adding things to the word.
I don't know if that's a more general thing or not.
Hmm.
I don't speak any Welsh
Okay.
at all. But I mean, even in English, so like thinking of the town names,
Mhm.
Llan means oh shoot, I've forgotten what Llan means now. So Afon or Aber means river. So the
Okay.
River Avon is literally the river.
Okay.
And
That's
so you've
pretty.
got
I think there's a lot
Aberystwyth.
of rivers that are the river all over the world, aren't there?
Yeah. So you've got like Abereron, which is the town at the River Aeron, Aberystwyth, and things like that. And I mean, you get that in the UK as well.
Yeah.
Like Stratford is the street ford. That's where I grew up. Oxford is the oxen ford.
Wait, the
Cambridge is the
ford,
bridge
like
over
across
the
a
River
river,
Cam.
the ford.
Yeah.
Ford?
So Oxford is where
Oh!
the cattle would cross the river, and
Okay.
that's why the city symbol for the logo for Oxford is an ox
Okay.
crossing a river.
Man.
And Cambridge is the bridge over the River Cam.
Man.
So
Okay.
I
So
mean,
two
I've done that.
questions.
Yes.
What's a Chestershire, and why don't you ever say it?
Chestershire.
Yeah.
So Shire is county.
Okay.
So we have Oxfordshire,
Yeah.
Warwickshire, Gloucestershire, Cambridgeshire,
Okay.
Aberdeenshire.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you mean? What is a Chestershire?
Well, like, okay, so it's like sure. I'm just thinking of things like Worcestershire and Gloucestershire. And
So
like,
Worcestershire is the county
Okay.
of which Worcester is the capital city.
okay.
So Gloucester is a city in the
Mhm.
county of Gloucestershire.
Okay.
And Worcester is the city in the county of Worcestershire. Like it's
Yeah.
the biggest city in that county, so the county is named
Mhm.
after it.
And is
But
is
yeah,
there
we don't
anything
say
that
Shire, we say Shire.
Yeah. Is there anything that the Chester means? Like in like Worcester is spelled Worcester and Gloucester is spelled Gloucester.
Oh, I see. So Chester is itself an actual town, Chester.
Okay.
So you mean sister? I
What's
don't
sister?
know.
I don't know how to say these things. There's
But
that,
yeah, so Worcester is what Americans would say is Worcester.
Worcestershire.
And so yeah, it's not Chestershire.
Okay.
It's Cheshire. That was
Okay.
what was confusing me.
Cheshire,
So the town, the city Chester.
Yeah.
Instead of being in Chestershire, is in Cheshire.
Okay. So the word city
Cheshire.
Cheshire is in.
Cheshire.
I've lost it.
But
then we
Cester,
yeah,
like
Chester. Okay.
Bicester,
Yes.
Worcester. I
Yeah.
don't know where that comes from,
Okay.
but that's a very common, like CESTR is always sister.
I wonder if it's related to sister. I don't know, because Sestra, I think is a very. I don't know where Sestra comes from, but it must be very old because like Sestra
Our
is sister in Ukrainian and it's also sister in English, which means there must be some
all
very
of
old.
our language is messed up.
Proto-Indo-European.
I was chatting with one of my friends who is a medieval linguist.
Okay.
And so the UK, well, the British Isles, because it obviously wasn't the UK for a long time, started off everyone speaking different forms of Gaelic. So that's so Gaelic, which is the Scottish language, Welsh. You've got Celtic, which is you've got Gaelic, and Welsh, which are all Celtic languages.
Okay. Yeah.
But then the Angles moved in from Germany, and the Sacs moved in from Germany. So that's what Anglo-Saxon is.
Yeah.
And
the Celts were like all over the place, weren't they? Like
yes,
at one point
but
they were very widespread.
Oddly, there's no Celtic in the English language. It's
Really?
been pushed into
Okay.
Cornish and Welsh and Scottish.
Hmm.
And so we have someone in the chat has said it's come from Castra, meaning castle. That makes a lot more sense.
Oh, okay. Okay. Cool.
Because all of those places would have had castles.
Right.
But so yeah, oddly enough, even though it was a Germanic language invading a Celtic language, there's no Celtic left in in English. So yeah, I mean, but we are less like the other European languages, which maybe are either Germanic or Romance.
Right.
We are a mix of Romance and Germanic and Nordic and every other country that decided to invade at whatever point.
But what was that phrase? The great beautiful bastard language?
I've not heard that, but
I-
it does describe it well.
I can't remember. Tom Scott used it in a video at one point, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
his originally. I think it was some linguist who was previously describing
Mm-hmm.
English. Yeah, the French of Quebec is actually like it's like evolutionarily split off from like the French of France. Like
Yes.
when we got here, right? So there's a lot of things that we do that French, like when France really codified its language, like they had a whole bunch of different dialects, and I think the king actually like decided we're getting most of these out. Like we're gonna have one French for the people. Might not have been the king. It might have been after the French Revolution.
I was going to say it might be a revolution thing because that's like when they standardized calendars and they standardized a lot. They standardized the education system during the revolution as well.
Yeah. So for example, the French, there were parts of French that used to, instead of like roi, or like le roi c'est moi, say, they would say le roi.
Oh, are you now?
Yeah, le roi c'est moi. That's how they would pronounce it, and we
Ooh,
still
weird.
have that in like a lot of Quebec Frenches. The
Yeah.
more sort of like out of the mainstream you get, the more you get these old, like these other dialects that have just been here ever since, and like evolving on their own paths.
Yeah. Well, it's like American sounds more similar to 16th century English than
Yeah.
British English does, just because those people went and it's its own evolutionary. We somehow got onto evolution. I like what you did there.
Hey, well-
Somehow got onto evolution.
Everything is evolution. It'll always come
Everything.
back.
Nothing in life makes sense except in the light of evolution.
Yes.
Theodorus Dobzhansky said that.
I like us too because that's true of evolution. It's also true of physics. So we can always come back to our specialties.
Fundamental level thing in the
Yes.
physics. But by the time you got down that far, it's just not interesting anymore. I'm
Oh,
sorry, Tim.
Come now.
Physics was always my least favorite science, and
Okay.
I just
Well, you're
very rarely see the appeal.
It's been good to have Sally on the chat, but I think this is going to be good.
Well, it's one of those things, right, where biology, you're like, oh, I've got this really interesting problem, and I'm going to take the most, like, literally, we tried to find the simplest solution. I'm trying to think of the name of it. What's it called? Not Occam's razor.
Yeah.
The other one.
I mean, Occam's razor is one of those. It goes by a few
Who
names, I
is?
think.
It's not Murphy's law. That's Sod's law. Whose law is it?
Let's see. Occam's razor, Solomonov's
Okay.
lightsaber. I don't know. There's
You take the. It begins with a P.
just tell us the actual statement.
Oh, so basically we take the most obvious solution, and 99% of the time that is the correct one because it requires the fewest assumptions
Yeah.
or the fewest extra bits. Physics, I swear, they're like, okay, we take your parsimony, thank you,
Parsimony, yeah,
element
yeah,
101 HS.
Yes.
Yeah, so we take the most parsimonious explanation.
Mhm.
Whereas physics is like, okay, I've worked out the most parsimonious explanation. Let's take the exact opposite of it, and that's what's the case. And I'm
That
like,
is so
"Oh."
far from true, Sally. It's it's the only thing about physics is that we've gone so far in simplifying our solutions that we've simplified them past the point of human comprehension.
Yeah, and I just don't like
The
having
brain
an
is
entire
not
field that
designed
you
for the
can't
simplicity of
think
physics.
about. Yeah. It's when it gets to the point where it's like, well, the equations tell us it's like this. I'm like, okay, so what does that mean in language? And you're like, you can't. Like, it's impossible to work this out using any route other than maths. I'm like, no, that doesn't.
See,
I don't like that.
See, I actually don't buy that a lot of the time. Like, I feel like as good of a science communicator as Richard Feynman was, this is my one like real beef that I have with him is that like I think he was convinced enough of his own genius that if he couldn't think of an intuitive explanation, he would proclaim that there was none and there was no other way to understand it. And I
don't know much of Feynman's writings or lectures.
Yeah, but like,
I mean, the entire field of quantum, right?
Well,
Like,
but Feynman's
understands
kind
that.
of like permeated he's one of these figures who's who was so good at communicating that his philosophy like permeated a lot of the way we think about physics. Like there's a few, I'm sure there's some characters like that in biology too.
Yeah, we have Dawkins.
Yeah. And I think it does physics a like there are going to be some things probably that you can't explain without math, but there are also a lot
The
of things that
entirety of quantum.
there are also things where there's just no one who's been able to understand the super mathy stuff has yet also been a great enough communicator and intuitor to figure, like, it's a very small pool of people that really
Yes.
understands like gauge field theory or whatever.
I don't even know what that is. In my head, that is either an entire theory about calipers and measuring gauges, or green gauges, gauges being the old English word for plums.
Okay.
Entire field about plums.
No, it's not that. But I don't know. Like, are there, so we could do this back and forth. I think this might be a cool place for this conversation to go, because like I asked people on Discord, like, hey, what are you confused about with evolutionary theory? And also, like, what do you think is cool about it?
Yeah.
So we have those. I'm sure that there are some spots that I'm confused about evolutionary theory and would love to know, like just where the
Tim,
field has gone.
We not only have an hour and 20 minutes now.
Yep.
I am going to plug that I am doing an evolution course on YouTube at the moment.
I should have put a link in the description. I gave a link to your main page though. So if you go on Sally's main page, I think it's like the first thing, right? You put it like right at the top.
It's at the top. It's called Evolution Live.
Yeah.
It's Thursdays at 4 p.m. my time, which is UTC +1. To give you an idea, for me, it's now 20 to 9. So 5 hours before this tomorrow. But yeah, where it is just going through from the very, very basics of evolution to slowly work up to university level. But I think a big difference between physics and biology is physics are much older science. You've been having your best ideas, like the big guys were what, 1700s?
No, even.
And then Einstein kind of figured out all the rest of it, and everything else is just the icing on the top. Whereas biology really started mid 1800s. Everything before that was natural history.
Yeah. But I think the beginning of
science.
Like, I think the other main difference is that biology, like, there's some sense in which fundamental physics is done. Like, it's not that, like, we don't have a fundamental theory of everything. Here's definitely what everything is made of, and I don't even know if that's possible.
It's gravity that's the sticking point, right?
It is. But there's a bunch of things that are sticking points. Like, even in the like matter side of things, there's a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. It's just arbitrary. It's like we have, it's like we have just so stories that are essentially, there's a number. Why is that number there? Nobody has any idea. It's this number. There's these fields. Why are these fields there? No clue.
Trying to answer the question, but what is a force?
Yeah. And
no one has provided me a satisfactory answer to that. People are like, it's something that allows things to move or work. I'm like, but what is, like, it's not something you can touch.
Okay, let me try to do it. Let me try to do a force.
For it.
Okay, so imagine that you have a rubber sheet. Okay.
Yes.
Have you seen that demonstration with like
the balls and it?
Steve Mould did like the rubber sheet and the waves and stuff.
Yeah.
So imagine that literally everything is that. So here's the thing. So
everything is the sheet, or everything is on the sheet?
There are a bunch of rubber sheets that are sort of like, they can pass through each other, but they can sort of interact in some weak ways. But everything is vibrations of different rubber sheets. So you have one sheet that is the electron sheet. We call it the electron field. And if you have a vibration in that.
But what is the sheet?
This is what nobody knows. This, like, you have to take this on faith. What's that thing? It's just a mathematical object,
I swear the more you dig into physics, the more it just becomes a religion. Obviously, it's not a religion because it has falsifiable hypotheses, but it's just like...
Like, would you be more comfortable if I said there are things called atoms and we don't know what they are?
I think it's because in biology, you can usually you're at the level where you can picture it in your head.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We go down to the atomic level. Very occasionally, we go down to the subatomic level when you're looking at things like respiration and photosynthesis.
Yeah.
That I know what they are. They are smaller versions of things that I can see in the real world.
Yes.
When you start getting to like the Higgs field, the electron field,
Hmm.
the whatever, it isn't a smaller version of this. Like, it's nothing that I can picture in my head.
It is though. It is like I'm gonna
But,
try to
but
get
sure,
there.
there are multiple rubber sheets, but
But you have
in
to, or like
no
you have to
world
imagine
do
that
rubber
you.
sheets actually interact in that way.
Okay. Maybe we shouldn't do rubber sheets. Let's try doing the air in a room, right? You can have
Okay.
sound. You understand compression waves of
I
air
do,
in a room,
yes,
right?
because there are lots of tiny little actual balls. There is
Yes.
actual matter
Yes.
that's just very, very small.
So imagine that you didn't know what air was, but
Mhm.
you do know that there are waves.
Yes.
You can do a whole theory of the, like the bouncing of waves and the diffraction of waves and everything else within the air without having any clue that air is made of molecules, that it's made, that are made of atoms, they're made of quarks or whatever. It's just, you black box it. There's a thing that can compress. We've got this equation for it, and it has waves, and the waves move in a particular way. That's where we are with quantum field theory. We know
Yeah.
that there are waves, what they're, we can describe their mathematics, but what they're made of, they could, like, for all we know, they could be made of like little gnomes hammering rocks. Like, there's literally.
Do you think we'll get to the point where we know what they're made of?
No, I don't. I genuinely don't. So the thing is, if you do, if you imagine an arbitrary theory of like little things interacting, like maybe they're digital switches hitting each other, or maybe they're things flipping upside down, or maybe they're actually little tiny springs that are going like this and interacting, or maybe they're sheets of rubber that are made of molecules or whatever. If you zoom out like many orders of magnitude, and all you can see is sort of like the lowest frequency vibrations, there is no way to tell the difference. They all converge to one type of theory, which is quantum field theory. And you're made of these large scale waves. Like, even the smallest quarks are incredibly large scale waves on this scale. So it's like making a being out of like sound waves that's like 1,000 kilometers across, and then imagining,
like, some people,
like,
I get it, that they're like,
yeah,
this is so cool, like, it's amazing, because I
Yeah.
fundamentally know that matter is energy, but the fact that we are disturbances in a field, like, I
Yeah.
can touch things, like
Mhm.
physical objects.
yeah,
It
this
doesn't
disturbance
make
of the field,
sense that
this
that is
disturbance
just
of
a
the field
disturbance
touches the other
nothing.
disturbance of the field.
Yeah, but like, a lot of people, they'd be like, wow, that's amazing. I just, like, it does not compute. This is why I didn't go into physics.
I mean,
It's just so, like, I'm sure that what you're saying is correct and that all of the maths works out, but it's just being unable to visualize it in a way that is actually meaningful. Like, there
Yes.
are plenty of visualizations of it, like, for example, the ripples in the gravitational field when the pulsar stuff came out.
Yeah.
But that's not even a representation of it.
No.
That is just a completely different thing that happens to follow similar principles.
Like, there's,
And
I've been really frustrated with this, actually, because I've been trying to make a quantum field theory video for like a year, and I can do like forces. So forces are literally, like, their equations are literally identical to sound waves, up to some little mathematical tricks. But you can get a very good picture of how, like, photons work, or like how, like, sort of the force fields work with like a sort of sound wave rubber sheet kind of picture. But it seems like what you're really stuck on is this idea of solidity, right? It's that waves pass through each other and matter does not, right? It interacts. And that's not something
waves are
that
continuous, whereas matter is discrete.
That's not something that model can capture. So I've been trying to figure out, like, for the life of me, for like a year, a model that does actually capture that phenomenon. And it's
I can
really
be your
difficult.
test subject.
So
Once you think you found a good explanation, if I get it, you'll know that everybody else can get it.
There's only one I've really been playing around with, and it's a model where you've got a field of bits, so like things that can be 0 or 1. And like you have to sort of take that at face value. It's just like you've got this field of bits.
Yeah,
sure. It's in 2 dimensions or whatever. What do you do with it? If you have a wave of sort of like 111,000, 111,000, 111,000, right? It has a certain frequency. And you try to overlay another wave that's identical on it, you can't do it. You can't count higher than one.
Because you don't have a 2, yeah.
Yeah. So if you overlay another wave, you're gonna flip the bit again. You're gonna get all zeros. And so that's like as close as I can get to this idea that, like, as matter is made of these matter waves, if you put you can't put two of them together. They'll just cancel each other out and disappear. So if you have, like, you can have a wave of one frequency sort of overlaid with a wave of a different frequency, but once you've filled up that spot, you can't put anything else there. So they're gonna have to work around each other.
Yes.
That's as close as I've gotten. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I get that that's why two pieces of matter cannot exist in the same space and time.
Yeah.
I get that.
But it's based on another, like, it's just shifting the problem down the road, right? Like,
Yeah.
why at every point in space can there only be a 0 or a 1?
And in my head, the bits are in discrete locations, so that there are gaps in between the bits when obviously there isn't. Or maybe there is. Maybe there is a resolution.
Yeah, there might be, right? Like, you could do
field.
this on a computer screen where you say, okay, well, I've put 1s in every second box and 0s, and you'll get like a grid.
Yeah.
And then you can't put another one on top of it because all your 1s are already 1s and all your 0s are already 0s. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like I need to do more convolutional neural networks or something to figure this out.
This is very existential for a mid-lockdown chat. My brain hasn't had to think this hard in many, many weeks.
Oh, I'm sorry. We can take it down. We can do some light.
Play me a bossa nova instead.
Oh yeah. Oh, This is your. Oh, hold on. This is your time to take a sip of your water. All you in the chat.
See, this is good. Like, you can say whatever you want on top of that sort of bed, and
Everything
is fine.
fields. It all makes sense if you think about it. I know.
I'm so jealous of your improv skills. I've been watching some of the streams, and I'm just like, oh, it makes me so sick.
Yeah,
There's a group in Oxford called the Oxford Imps, which is our improvised group.
Ooh.
And being a bunch of Oxford people, the level of nerdery and intelligence, like, they are able to come up with insane rhymes just on the drop of a hat. It's just so smart. I mean, it spoils you, because when you see any other improvised group, you're like, well, I mean, it's good, but it's just not quite as quick-witted.
Yeah, no.
But one of the things they have to do is come up with songs and raps and rhymes and whatever on the spot. And they also obviously have the improvised piano underneath it. And it's, I just wish I had that talent.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know. It's like anything else. You practice it, right? Like,
it's totally a skill. It's just, when I say I wish I had that talent, it is I have not put in the time required to get that talent.
Have you seen any of these crossovers between, like, the world of improv and the world of science communication that people are trying to do? Like, Alan Alda is big into this, where he made this whole, like, institute at Stony Brook trying to get scientists to do improv to improve their, like, communicating skills and stuff.
I think it depends on the level of science communication you're at. There are some scientists, because I do a lot of interviews and things like that, and obviously I was an academic, and there are a lot of scientists who absolutely freeze up in a public speaking setting.
Right, yeah.
Who are like, I will read what I had written on my piece of paper, and that is it. And so for those people, just kind of like we were saying with music, basically, like, it would be like, this is the piece of music, this is what Mozart has written, anything else is wrong. And then you just get this fear and that block. Yeah. So that even when something does go wrong and is different, you have no way of recovering. And I think for those people, doing improv is probably quite a good practice of how to recover, how to think on your feet and all that.
Yeah, like anything to loosen you up.
Yeah, but I
it's gonna
think
do the
once
job.
you've got to that stage, I'm not sure how much benefit improv has.
Yeah, I can see that. I think I would agree because like there's a point where your main job is not to be like able to talk, it's to take very complicated ideas and like innovate ways to make them understandable.
Yeah, once you've reached the point of how to talk on a stage, you've then got to work out what it is you're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that improv can help for that first bit, but maybe not for the second.
Do you have like, I don't know, do you have any hacks for that second part that you use? Or is it just figuring it out over a very long period of
So
time?
much of it is intuitive.
Yeah.
I have always been a natural teacher.
Mm.
So even when I was younger, like at school, I would end up teaching my friends things, which my teachers took complete advantage of.
Very nice. Yeah.
One of my science teachers deliberately sat me down next to someone who had a very different learning style to the teacher, so that I could help her with stuff. Because like it's very different being in a lecturing position to being in a one-on-one situation where you can answer very specific questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so very often we'd be talking at the back of the class and they'd be like, what are you talking about at the back? It's like, oh, it's fine, miss, we're just explaining question 5. It's like, okay, carry on.
Oh, did Sally freeze? We've got a frozen. Oh, there we go. Sorry, you froze. You froze there for a second.
I did. It's fine.
I'm not sure what happened. Yeah.
And I did a lot of drama, and I taught, or not taught, but I assisted on a lot of drama for younger classes. So when I was about 14, I was helping out with the 5-year-olds, and with that, I did a lot of like museum volunteering. So I grew up talking about science to other people since I was like 14, 15.
Mm. Yeah.
So I just kind of have an intuitive idea for when something's going to work or not. And it's really hard to explain. Like sometimes like when you're thinking of an analogy, you can just be thinking through loads of different things and you're like, that's not it. For some reason, you're like, that's not going to work. Or you must find this when you're coming up with an idea for a video, because your videos in particular take an awful lot of work. So people always ask you like, oh, so how do you get your video ideas? Getting the ideas is not the problem. It's working out which ones to put all of those energy and resources into.
Yeah, it's solving a very like, I don't know. I feel like my videos are a lot of the time more, I don't know. They're like, in some sense, they're like fitting pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. Like, I think I have a better sense now of what my intuition is, like, of making my intuitions explicit than I used to. Like, it used to be very much like that. Like, just this is right, and I know it's right, and another way would be wrong, and I don't know why. But I don't know. I've been really interested recently in like these skills that we have that are just honed by like raw experience or by, I don't know, early exposure or talent or whatever it is. Like once you get past the point where you're good at them implicitly, can you pull yourself out of it, like observe yourself as a third party and make correlations between the explicit facets and figure out what it is that you're doing in your subconscious? And I've been doing this recently a lot with music.
Scott is very good at that.
Okay.
Because he has things like, if ever you're stuck as to what the video is going to be about, like think of the title first, for example, which is a really good piece of advice he gave me. And he, in general, is very good at objectifying what it is that he does subjectively.
Yeah, it's like a meta communication. Like,
yeah,
can you analyze? Can you do science on yourself and your
art? It's like why they say that the best singing
science.
Teachers are not the people that are naturally gifted at singing.
Yeah.
Because the people that are naturally gifted haven't had to think about it that hard.
Yeah, which is, I don't know what that says for me. I know that I'm not very good at explaining how to do music to people, because I very much just lack that. Like, it was never absent for me. It like must have gone into my brain before I was aware that things were going into my brain. Because if you ask me, you know, why does that work? Whatever. Like I don't know why it works. Like I watch music theory YouTube a lot of the time, and I'm like fascinated by their breaking down the things I already
Oh, I
know.
love that stuff. Oh, it's great. But yeah, like you didn't have to take it from the theoretical standard of, okay, you're doing 1, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
And so you've got 1, 3, and 5 being the important notes in that scale, and then 4 leading up to a 5 means that you've got that resolution there. Like that's not something that you're doing when you're just like, I'm just playing a C and E and F and G.
And it's the same. It's the same thing with linguistics, right? Where it's like you know all the rules of a language, and then you see them written out, and you're like, wait, that is what I do.
Referencing it again, this is what all of my conversations end up being like. Tom made another linguistics video, which was about the order in which
adjective order. Yeah.
That blew my mind because it's so instinctive.
Yeah. So what's the good example of that? It's like a big.
It would be the bright, big, fast, furry balloon. Furry green balloon, for example.
A furry green balloon versus a green furry balloon.
A green furry balloon, yeah.
Like a big furry balloon. Furry big balloon? Furry big balloon doesn't make any sense. A furry big balloon is some brand name called Big Balloon that happens to be furry.
A big furry green balloon.
Yeah, a green.
But not a green furry big balloon.
Yeah.
That's just.
Yeah, come and buy my furry big balloon, now available.
But it is that react, that kind of that doesn't feel right to me, that I get when I'm thinking of science stories. So I've been on a lot of storytelling courses, for example, just because it is nice to have that structure to how you're thinking about things. Like, okay, where is the conflict in this story? Where is the arc? But a lot of the time I'll just be like, especially when I'm getting ideas from watching lectures, so maybe I'll be at a conference and I will hear lecture after lecture after lecture, and then someone will just put a throwaway comment in there and you're like, that is the story. If I was to make a video about that, all of the rest of what you think is interesting is fine, but there's that kind of, that sparks the interest that I find very difficult to explain what it is. I mean, the best way that I can say it is when you're talking about it in the pub, it's the stuff that your friends and non-scientists ask you questions about.
Yeah.
Back when people could go to pubs.
I saw an interview with Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Fight Club and a bunch of other like very weird books. And he said that the mark of a really great story is that if you tell it at a party, everyone tries to tell a better version of like they try to one up your story, and they're like, oh, that's great, like I've got this other one. I guess people like that, for at least for his like personal stories, like that's when it's resonating with people.
Whereas like in science, the best ideas are the ones where you're like, well, it's obvious that that's the case, but you only realize that after someone's told it to you.
Do you ever use like formal, like the thinking about formal story structure when you're composing like science stories? Like I watched this at VidCon a couple years ago. Have you ever met the guys from Wisecrack, the Wisecrack channel?
Yes.
Yeah, they have this whole thing.
Jacob, right?
I met Jacob. Alec is the guy who gave the talk. I can't remember his last name. I'm gonna try to have him on here. He did one of the coolest talks that I've seen at like a VidCon kind of thing, because he broke down their entire process, because they're always doing they're like sneaking philosophy into things. That's their thing. They're like, it's like, oh, this is you think this is a review of Star Wars? Actually, we're gonna bring in like Sartre or whatever. And they think of every one of their pieces in terms of like the hero's journey, like cycle thing. And I had never thought about that. But then when I started to think about it, it helped me codify what I was doing in a lot of pop, like sort of pop song, like matching pop songs onto scientific stories, because pop songs all have this they all have this like rising action to climax to falling kind of thing. And the good pop songs will often have, like Shape of You is a good example, where it has like the story goes along with that arc. And I realized I had kind of been intuiting that and like making a story that builds and has these like waves and a climax and resolution as well. And it was, I don't know, it was a cool moment.
So in storytelling workshops and classes, it's very much about the hero's journey and that where is the conflict. Like, if ever, I do find it can be quite labored to put that onto a science story sometimes, because the natural thing is the scientist themselves always has conflict, because they're going up against the unknown. And so the natural arc of any science story is scientist is struggling to find out the truth, goes through many struggles in their experiments, and eventually finds the truth. Like that is the ultimate. Certainly with biology, like we have animals and plants, we have individual actors. So like the jackdaw outside the window has something that it wants. And certainly within an evolutionary perspective, if you take the teleological argument, the jackdaw wants to improve its own fitness. And there are obstacles to that. Maybe there is a mutation that it's lacking, or it's in the wrong environment, and then eventually it evolves into something else. But to get it for the science itself, I find can be quite hard. Like it's very easy to put a hero's story onto a person, but to explain the abstract science and still have that sense of narrative can be quite tricky.
I think there's a way you can do it a little bit with like you make the person reading it or watching it like into that character. I think that can work very effectively, right? Like you put the problem in their mind and let them struggle with it and like see the conflict in themselves, and then you can like explore your way to the resolution.
Yeah, but I suppose that is following the scientist journey as well, though. It's like, this is the problem. How do we solve the problem?
Yeah.
You can also go with this is the simpler version. Okay, now you got the simpler version. This is the next level up. Now you got that. This is the next level up above that. So yeah, it's one of those things where if you tell someone, okay, your story should have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there should be some sort of conflict and resolution, and that the hero should end in the same space but be changed as a result of the journey that the hero has been on. Like
this is hero's journey in
you can come up with versions of that, but it's quite formulaic in a way that I think there are other ways as well of telling science that don't necessarily follow that journey. Some creative ways, like I don't know. I made a video. I made a video. This is what 280 bananas sounds like.
Oh, I remember that video. Yeah.
Which is because I happen to have 280 bananas for another video, and so I asked around and got a Geiger counter, and it's talking about radiation, but there's no real journey to it other than there's the hook and then there's the reeling in. The hook is
it's the clickbait version of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Which is, I am going to put an absurd question in your mind.
So what does 280 bananas sound like?
I now have
and
this
then once you've
conflict.
Got them there,
you
can then be like, okay, now I'm going to explain what radiation is and why natural objects can have radiation and it not be harmful. But it's not like the only conflict there is the conflict between the viewer and the title of the question. And so the rest of the video isn't really a story in a sense, but lots of people love that video. And I think it's a very different structure to most of the videos I do. Most of the videos I do tend to have more of a narrative form. But it's just one of those, it's more of an avant-garde art piece. I'm actually coming up with one of them at the moment, which is going to be watching paint dry. And about the science of paint drying, but it's all in the subtitles on a silent, just literally still locked off shot of paint drying.
I would be very interested to see. I'd be very interested to see how that video does.
Yeah.
It's like it sounds like one of those experiments of like, all right, I have to do this. I don't know if it's gonna work.
Yeah.
How people are gonna respond, but I don't know. Yeah, I did this video. I did this like 12-hour piece on my second channel called "I Am Streaming in a Room," where I just looped. Like it's based on a 60s piece where they play a speech into a room. and then record it on a video on a tape and play it back into the room and record that and just keep playing it back until like the speech dissolves into the resonant frequencies of the room and creates this weird warping sound. So I did the same thing, looping through the YouTube streamer and back into my streaming program and back out into the YouTube streamer again.
Very minimalist.
Yeah, and it's really weird. It deforms into just these like bleeps and bloops and everything is orange and blue and it's very strange. But it was one of those things where I was just like, this is not going to go viral. There's no way that this is a good idea.
It might do.
But also, you just have to, I don't know, like there's some things where you're like, this has to exist.
Yeah.
Now that I've thought of it.
I mean, it might go viral. Like, look at primitive technology, crying out loud. Like, on paper, that should not work.
Primitive
but
technology?
It does. Have you not? Oh, you have got.
Am I missing something? Are you about to give me?
You're gonna love primitive technology.
Okay.
Primitive technology is literally watching a guy silently going about building things in a forest using only primitive technology.
Ooh, all right.
And they're like 10, 15-minute long videos, and it's perfectly edited, but it's very slow editing.
It's not the super montage.
No, it's the complete opposite of that, and it has spawned a lot of slow style filming. So I mean, there are so many copycats of primitive technology now. But it's like I am addicted to woodworking videos.
Yeah, I got into wood turning for a while, and like that guy who makes guitars.
I don't know the guitar.
Yeah, that guy. He made like this first one. I think he made a guitar out of. What was it? Colored pencils, I think. Just like tons of colored pencils and like epoxy.
But is he doing it silently? Or does he explain it as he's
not
going
narrating
along?
It. There's like music.
Okay.
But
but instead of it being, it's not there to be informative. It's there just to enjoy the experience of watching it.
I mean,
that's kind of what primitive.
But
yes, but that's what primitive technology is. So it's like, okay, I'm trying to make clay tiles, but first he's got to dig out the clay, and then he's got to wash the clay, and then he's got to build a fire that's hot enough to turn it into pottery, ceramic, rather than just clay. But it's just so calm and slow, and I mean, it's like Bake Off. People thought that Great British Bake Off would never work. It's a show about competitive baking, but the competition stakes are much lower because at the time it came out in the middle of like MasterChef and Hell's Kitchen, and I don't know how many of these have gone across the pond.
Okay, yeah, I've never watched that one. I just presumed it was another one of these baking, cooking shows with the same sorts of things.
No, they are very competitive.
Okay,
like people care a lot, and it's pitting people against each other, whereas Bake Off is so friendly and jolly, and none of the TV execs thought that would do well because it's a gentle baking program with members of the public who aren't experts or professionals. But it just caught something in the public imagination in the same way that primitive technology did. Sometimes the things that you write down on paper just that you wouldn't expect to work just do, and they capture something that's not been satisfied by the rest of the market.
With that particularly, like in a sea of shouting people and like over the top like crazy thumbnails, every once in a while like the right very calm thing can be very disruptive and like interesting, right? Like
that's why I started a new series called Nature Dates.
Okay.
Because it's a very American, so because YouTube is so predominantly American, and I don't know what Canadian is like.
I mean, we're just Canada's, in terms of culture, Canada's very close to just being America's hat. Like you just take whatever geographic correlations there are between the South and the North of the States and extend them a little further into Canada, and that's what we are. So
the TV grammar is very different in the US than in the UK. It's in the US, it's a lot more high octane. You've got to cut every 3 seconds. Everything's got to be like when they do that really weird thing when they take the people from the program, put them in a studio, and ask them to talk about what they were feeling like in the present tense. Like
Yep.
that does not happen as much on UK television.
Have you
And
ever
it's
had
all,
to do something like that? It's super
No.
awkward.
oh, I would be
Oh
terrible.
yeah, no.
But
And
all that
yeah.
forced drama and like big sound effects and oversaturated and like pumping bass lines and all of that. Whereas the British way of editing is a lot slower and a lot calmer, and kind of the emotion happens rather than being forced.
Okay.
You see
yeah.
that a lot on YouTube as well, where a lot of the biggest, most successful things are the most clickbaity, the most ridiculous. People are shouting, people with over exaggerated emotions, doing ridiculous things. And sometimes you just want something a little bit calmer. And so I created Nature Dates, which is a series where I go out with a friend and we spend a lovely day in nature, and I teach them about things that I like doing, so rock falling or pond dipping or bird watching, or
Nice.
and it should feel like you're literally just on a lovely afternoon out with a bunch of friends, as kind of that respite from all of the capturing your attention in such an immediate way. Obviously, going out with friends and filming it is now a very bad format to have in terms of creating new videos. But yeah, it is nice to have a bit of a break from. It is the attention economy and people constantly seeking your attention.
Yeah. Although it is interesting that there's this like dichotomous split of the stuff that people will consume on the internet. It's like we're fine with a 5-minute video that's very high octane. We're fine with binging an entire Netflix series that's like 10 hours. Yeah. We're fine with like a 3-hour podcast if it's a thing we're interested in. But I feel like when I'm consuming those things, I'm in different modes. Like I'll never go on YouTube looking for like, I don't know, like a how ridiculous type video and then end up watching a 2-hour like intellectual podcast. Like I don't know.
There's for the first time have a TV.
Okay.
So before I would always watch TV at my computer. And so for me, the lines between interactive and like sit forward and lean back viewing, as they call it, has always been very blurred. But now I have a TV. It's very much when I am sat at the TV, I'm looking for something that is at least 30 minutes long. Yeah. I don't want the faff of having to find the next thing with my zapper. But
I don't think I have that, but I have I am doing dishes or whatever, and I need something that like I don't
sometimes
even really
you want something
watch.
Longer.
Yeah.
Whereas on YouTube, I tend to be or when I'm sat at a computer, I tend to be a lot more fluid with the stuff I'm watching. This conversation is going all over the place, and I love it.
Yeah. It's like, do you find that are there stories that you haven't figured out how to put, like, particularly in this format?
That's a very good question.
Like, because I find there is a way that like there's what you have to do to serve a story, but there's also what you have to do to serve YouTube, right? Like the bananas thing is a great thing for YouTube. Like
could only work on YouTube.
250 bananas or whatever it was. What was
that,
the exact
or an
number?
art gallery where you just have a pile of bananas in the middle of a blank white warehouse and a Geiger counter.
Yeah,
and that would be it.
And that's like
very art piece, installation piece sort of thing.
It's cool. It works, and it's also weird. Like it works as a thumbnail.
Yeah.
But there are there are definitely a lot of stories that don't necessarily like. This is why I've started reading a lot. I don't know, like trying to read more books, because I find that I'm exposed to only certain types of science stories when I confine myself to the internet. It's just like there's not often the time to lay out I don't know, like a novel length sort of equivalent of a story of science in this medium.
I have like lots of lists of video ideas. And I think I just throw out the ideas that don't fit onto YouTube so early on that they barely even register into the consciousness. It's like thinking through a topic and you'd be like, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. And I can often spend a lot of time thinking of an idea. And I know that somewhere in that idea, it will work on YouTube. but it takes me a good few months to work out exactly what the angle is going to be.
Yeah.
And that's why it takes me so long often to make a video from start to end, because you just need time to sit with it and work out what the thing is going to be. For example, I filmed a video back in June where I went and caught 852 swans.
Goodness gracious. That sounds dangerous.
Not single-handedly. But that was documentary style filming. So I turned up on the day and shot it all, but then trying to work out what the narrative is going to be after the fact. Because normally the way I make my videos is I work out the narrative, I script it, I film it, and then I edit it exactly as I had planned in my head. And documentary style filming is a completely different thought process, where you shoot everything and then you got to look at the footage and be like, okay, where is the story in this? And you can't go back and film little bits in between. And that has taken me a long time sat in the edit working out where the narrative is going to be, so that it's not just this thing happened and then this thing happened and then this thing happened and then this, but there is some kind of structure to it.
I hope that you're just calling your video I caught 800 swans and it's you with a face like this in the middle of just all swans just everywhere.
The thumbnail isn't this and swans. The thumbnail is me holding a swan.
Okay, that's
and
good.
It looks so angry. Like they look, because the way you basically cuddle them and then they have their neck stuck out and they look so undignified, because they're quite regal animals in the water. They're very majestic, and then you just see them being held by these muddy volunteers. And it's like,
they're big. Like I lost a bet recently because someone asked me, who do you think would win in a fight between a goose and a swan? And I had thought geese.
It depends on the time of year.
Like geese are pretty ferocious and they can be really nasty, but I just hadn't realized how large swans are. Like there are YouTube videos of swan versus goose battles. And they're always the swan just chased, like the goose runs away in terror from this gigantic beast with a huge neck.
So if I remember, female swans are about 10, 11 kilos and male swans are about 14, 15 kilos.
Yeesh.
So but then obviously they're birds, so they're quite low density. So they are big animals. They're only particularly aggressive when they're guarding eggs or chicks, though. Whereas I find geese to be aggressive all the time. I mean, I love geese. I'm not scared of them like many people are. But I feel like if you were to do it in like November, when the swans aren't particularly territorial, I reckon the geese might have more motivation to win. Yeah. Whereas if you did it in May, when the swans are at peak territorial, they would slaughter anyone nearby.
I don't know if geese are like. I wonder if wild geese are as angry, because like I don't actually know like whatever the kind of goose is that you usually see like on farms and kind of in peopled areas. I don't know what that is. Like it's
so you got as in the white like Untitled Goose Game.
Yeah,
goose.
like the standard goose looking goose.
I suppose it's just a domestic goose.
I guess. Where does it come from? Like in Canada we have like Canada geese. We have
I was gonna say, do you call them Canada geese or do you just call them?
We have Canada geese and we have snow geese, which are like white geese, but I don't think they're that weird domestic thing.
No, they're not.
And I sort of wonder if that one has just survived.
When I'm thinking of geese, I'm thinking of Canada geese. Because they are vicious.
That's true. Canada geese are.
No, they're lovely. They have beautiful eyes.
Wait, do you have Canada geese there?
Yeah, loads of them.
Oh man, did we like send them there, or were they there before and called something else?
I'm fairly certain they're not invasive. We get an awful lot of water birds in the UK because we are an island on the migration route between the Arctic and mainland Europe. So we have a good amount of bird diversity, particularly things like geese that can fly long distances.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think there was a video of a goose in the middle of a herd of bulls and it just doesn't back down and all the bulls run away scared because it's like tiny in comparison and they're all circled around it with their horns down charging at it and the goose is just like, I'm not backing down. "Mm," and
stand
they're like,
around.
"Oh," and yeah, I
This,
think it's the cutest.
there's a someone in the chat said, well, either one of them can destroy a jet engine. I think they're referring to geese or swans.
Well, yes, but then so can a chicken. So.
Yeah, and so can like a tiny little amount of volcanic ash that just happened to get in the way. It's not. It's not. Jet engines are not designed to not be destroyed if things fly in them. They're designed to just.
No, they are very much designed not to be destroyed.
Yeah, there's just limits to what you could pull off, I think.
Yeah, they're just designed to destroy in a very particular way so that they don't knock out the rest of the plane.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine if one engine fails. It's just two fails that you got the problem.
Two simultaneous birds.
Yeah.
Yeah, a flock of geese. Yeah, that would probably.
Well, that's what the Hudson River crash was.
Really, it was like more than one goose.
It was an entire flock of geese.
Jeez.
And it hit, and so it knocked out both engines. And I think because there used to be a wetland there, because obviously New York's next to the river.
Yeah.
I think they've now changed how they manage that bird colony so that you're less likely to get large flocks of geese so close to the airport.
All right. That sounds like
Would recommend the Tom Hanks film about it. Very good film.
All right. Yeah. We think we should talk about. Should we talk about what your specialties are? I think we have been rambling. People are like, have you talked about flies yet? You told me there would be flies. We haven't mentioned flies once so far. Someone told me recently.
Well, I mean, my specialty is technically communicating science through video, and we have been talking about that.
We have. But you do have another specialty.
I do. Let me see if I can find it.
I have the specialty of quantum field theory, or rather, 2 + 1 dimensional parity violating quantum gravity. Is my particular specialty.
2 + 1 what? This is my specialty.
Take a sip. Hey, there it is. What can I put that up to the camera a little more? Family and familiarity in flies. That's a. Can I just say bang on the title? That's a fantastic title.
I spent a long time working out whether it should be family and familiarity in fruit flies or family and familiarity in flies, because you get the nice pattern of 3 with family, familiarity, and flies.
Yeah.
But you get 4th alliteration if it's family and familiarity in fruit flies. It was a big decision.
I think I don't know. I think you made the right choice. I think it's like those. Do you ever get into like pun wars with people over text message? And it's easy to just,
all the time.
Like you just take it a little too far, and then the person.
UK science YouTubers group chat, which has been very busy since all of us went into lockdown, and the puns on there are terrible.
I have to be careful with those because I think of them too quickly, and so I'll send like 5 in quick succession, and then the other person's like, "This isn't fun anymore. You gotta stop." I feel like you could.
I usually just have to send a message being like, "I'm sitting here desperately trying to think of a pun for the last 15 minutes. I haven't thought of one.
I'm so
Please
sorry.
know that it wasn't for lack of trying."
Yeah. The ways that we front our cortical power over text message are very odd.
But yes, this was 5 years in the making.
Someone told me recently it was an evolutionary biologist at a university in Saudi Arabia that I went to visit. And
interesting combination.
Yeah, and he was telling me because he's like was really into Evo Devo and like really liked my video, but he was telling me fruit flies for that are like, it turns out that they're a really bad model. Like they were the original model for a lot of this like development stuff. And it turns out that they have so many special, like they've been so specialized for fast reproduction and like quick turnover, which is why we use them as a model organism, that they're really weird in a lot of ways compared to other insects. And I had like never even considered that.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I mean, a huge caveat of every fruit fly research is that we're doing it in lab fruit flies. And in my Viva, what you would call a defense, you have to be able to justify, like, is any of the work that you have spent the last 5 years doing relevant at all? Because you're doing it in such an unnatural species.
So are lab fruit flies very different even from like wild fruit flies?
Yeah, and
really?
The extent to which we don't know. So Drosophila melanogaster is the species that we study. It is a cosmopolitan species, so it's found on everywhere that humans live. so everywhere except Antarctica. And they feed on the yeasts that grow on rotting fruits. So
on the yeast.
Yes, they are fungivores. So like when you have a rotting banana that's left out, those tiny flies you get will be Drosophila melanogaster. I mean, there are many species of Drosophila. All of them are fruit flies. In fact, I can skip through to my introduction and tell you exactly how many species there are. I really enjoyed writing my introduction. I don't know, did you? You've got a PhD, right?
I do not have a PhD. I have a master's. So I did the thesis thing, but it wasn't this like, this is as long as I can remember having existed practically that I've been working on this thing. Like I feel like people who get through the PhD, it's so much more of like an era. For me, it was I did a year of classes and then I did a year of a thesis, and it's like 80 pages.
It is entirely an era.
Yeah.
Because it goes on for so long, and it just consumes your life. If ever you speak to a PhD student, or someone with a PhD, they will tell you not to do a PhD.
That seems yeah. Do you still say that? Is that your recommendation? Don't do one.
Just don't do it. If you value your physical and mental well-being, don't do a PhD. And of course, people still do them, and I would probably do it again if I actually thought about it. But I actually can't find the bit in the introduction.
I feel like people could convince me to do a PhD. Like maybe if we did find like the next stage of the theory of reality, like what's fundamental, like what are quantum fields made of or something. And like,
would you do a PhD on science communication? Or would that be not scientific enough for you?
I don't see why. I mean, unless someone will like just let me use my last 7 years of videos as like most of the work, and then I can write something up and they'll give me a doctorate. Like I'd do that. That's fine. But
it's like when university departments say, "Oh yes, it's very good that you're doing all this science communication. It definitely helps." It's like, yeah, but it doesn't count towards my thesis, does it? So in my thesis, in the very introduction, I have an unnatural history of Drosophila melanogaster, because it is such an unnatural species. So what were we talking? Oh yeah, so
can you like highlight it? Like what are they? What has made them really different from?
So I think the way to highlight it is just to describe what conditions they live in the lab. So these are flies that are 4 or 5 millimeters long, and interestingly, their sperm is 60 millimeters long.
Goodness.
Goes bigger. It's literally 10 times longer than their body. And
they're all like
so
wrapped
normal.
up.
Yeah, it's all coiled up into one little package. And so the fruit flies normally, like when we think of a wild fruit fly, we think of it in an orchard because you've got lots of pockets of rotting fruit, you've got trees and branches. Drosophila means dew loving, so DEU, because they're most active at dawn and dusk. And they have loads of spaces to disperse. They lay eggs on the rotting fruit. Those eggs hatch into maggots, and then those maggots eat the yeast on the rotting fruits. They are able to actually disperse for 5 meters or so if they have to, which, given the maggots are again maybe 8 millimeters long, is a pretty long way.
Disperse,
and then
meaning like
they crawl.
Okay, I was imagining some sort of like maggot shower, so I'm.
Oh no! If a maggot, like if the apple runs out of food, like if they've eaten it all up, they are able to travel for meters.
Okay.
To find the next patch of food. So they live in these patchy environments. In the lab, we have them in plastic boxes, which we call cages. The box is about this big.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, maybe 2 shoe boxes stacked on top of each other. And there are literally tens of thousands of them in each of these cages. They are fed with bottles of yeast jelly. So we mix yeast and agar and some sugars and other things together.
Okay.
We put the food in once a week. They have, there's always food in there. But obviously at the start of the week, there's more food. And then as the week goes on, there's less food. There is no spatial variation in this environment. The levels of overcrowding are insane. You would never get such a dense population in nature. They are at a constant temperature, they are at a constant humidity, they have a very constant light cycle. So 9 a.m. the lights go on, 9 p.m. the lights go off. So there is virtually no environmental variation in these populations.
So you've put these flies basically in a giant fly metropolis.
Yeah.
And let them select based on that environment for.
So our flies were collected in the wild in Africa in the 1970s.
Goodness.
And that I worked out how many generations it was, but it's the equivalent of humans going back 10,000 years.
All right.
So if you take the human generation, and I'm just trying to see if I can actually find it in my.
Right. So fruit fly generation is like a week.
Fruit fly generation is 2 weeks. So at 25 degrees, it takes them 11 and a half days. This is how carefully we know everything, but how carefully they are controlled. At 25 degrees and about 60-70% humidity. They prefer it more humid, but then so do the parasites that feed on them. So they take 11 and a half days to go from egg to adult. They then take 8 hours to reach sexual maturity. After that 8 hours, the females are basically producing eggs, assuming they've got access to males, constantly at about between 50 and 100 eggs a day for anywhere from 3 to 2 weeks as an adult, at which point they die. And obviously their egg production declines over time. But it means that you have got such a selective pressure for fast generation time, for being able to just churn out eggs as much as possible, for being able to outcompete other individuals. And there is no selection for being able to cope with different environments, being able to make use of different types of food. So like being unafraid of exploring, or being very good at traveling long distances to go from one patch of food to another. Like those have been completely wiped out by this point. And so, and we controlled them to the point where when I needed to collect them, but that would involve me going into the lab at 3 o'clock in the morning after doing one experiment where I was in the lab every day at 3 o'clock in the morning. We just put them in a different temperature room. So they're in a room at 25 degrees. Oh, okay, I don't want to collect them tonight. I'm going to put them in the 18 degrees room. That doubles their development time. So now instead of 8 hours from hatching as an adult to being sexually mature, if you catch them in that time, you know that they're virgins. It gives you 16 hours. And like the level of precision with fruit flies, because they've been so well studied since the 70s.
But does everyone the world over use this like one population from the 70s?
No, so there are different populations of this. Everyone, when they talk about fruit flies, is studying Melanogaster, that one species.
Okay.
Other people do study other species, but if someone says I studied Drosophila, they mean Melanogaster unless specified otherwise. So there are different populations, and actually that's what one of my papers was looking at. When you find differences between different labs, how much of that is due to the population. So different labs might have them on a different setting. So some labs might keep theirs in discrete generations. So whereas ours are always allowed to breed and they just die whenever and they breed whenever, sometimes they have, okay, we collect all the eggs on day 1 and then we kill everyone on day 15. And those day 1 eggs are the ones that go on to form the next generation. So then those are called discrete generations, and there is so much pressure to be only laying eggs. Because if you lay eggs on, like, if you can survive to day 16, it doesn't matter. You're going to get killed anyway.
Right.
So that's so regimented. So you have different populations that have been taken from different parts of the world. And what's interesting is it means you then have, I'm geeking out about you. But
no. This is keep going.
You then have a phylogeny, so a family tree of the lab flies.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, our flies were taken because our supervisor had got his flies when he started his own lab from his supervisor. So our group's flies and her group's flies are genetically very similar.
Okay.
There's a group in Canada that we work quite closely with, and they got their flies from another lab who's also studying it. So their flies are genetically very similar and have been reared in similar conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like all these different labs around the world, some of them have got more closely related groups of flies than others. And it's just so interesting.
Okay, so did you look at like, or I mean, not necessarily you, but like, has anyone really done these experiments of like, okay, we're gonna take our modern flies, we're gonna go capture some new flies from Africa, and just like see what they're like? I mean, I'm sure on a genetic level you can see what the drifts have been and like
yeah. So I mean, they're
whatever,
not just from Africa. Our population happened to be from Dahomey, which is the home of voodoo. Interestingly enough.
All right. Really? I thought voodoo was voodoo is originally African.
Yeah.
I know it was fairly popular in the like the Indie, like the Caribbean. Okay,
I
but that makes sense.
suppose that's after
Yeah.
migration and slavery, though.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, the Kingdom of Dahomey is where our flies are from.
Okay.
In modern day Sudan. I can't remember. The fly population is called Dahomey, which is why we name it that. So very surprisingly few people have studied wild flies, in part because when you're used to studying lab flies, they're a right diva. They're such a pain in the arse to do. Like, you got to collect them, and a big part of it is when you take a wild fly and you test it against a lab fly under lab conditions.
Right.
That's quite unfair because you're testing a lab fly in the conditions it's used to.
I mean, you're not trying to necessarily be fair to the fly. You're just trying to see what the differences are, right?
Yeah, so genetically you can do genetic differences, and there has been that. So I study behavior. So I am looking at the behavior of these flies. And so you will have this short period of time where in maybe 3 or 4 generations, so that's 2 months, you get this incredible amount of evolution of these wild flies. So although we know a bit about wildflies, there's been not a huge amount done. And most of my thesis is saying this was a really fun experiment to do in the lab. Someone else should replicate it on wildflies and see whether that holds up or not. But it is such a hard. It's a much logistically, it's a much harder thing to do. It takes more time. It takes more resources. From a scientific perspective, the results are much less predictable. So you might be spending 6 months and not get data that's usable at the end of it. So a PhD student is less likely to do that because obviously they want to have usable data at the end of it. Even if it's a null hypothesis, like even if it's a boring result, you still need usable data to get a boring result. Whereas working on wild stuff, you might just not get anything of use.
But what might be completely different? Like what would be the most likely thing? So for example, are you aware of this like mild drama in the like sort of internet evolutionary space with the Weinstein brothers? Do you know who Brett Weinstein is? Okay,
no.
so there's
I am so bad at keeping up with drama.
So levels of internet culture, there are these kind of, I don't know, like there's this kind of a whole subculture of the internet based around like the Joe Rogan podcast and the types of intellectuals that he has on.
What's the Joe Rogan podcast?
Okay.
Is this like skeptics?
No, it's not skeptics. It's these people who are part of this like intellectual dark web type thing. I don't know. They have terms for themselves, and there's a whole bunch of stuff.
I'm the sort of person that to find the dark web, I would Google search how to find the dark web.
Yeah, well, like I think Sam Harris is probably like the most well known of kind of this circle.
Okay, so a bit of intellectual snobbery in there.
Little. Well, it's like people who for one reason or another, are not in the, like, they're kind of outside like the mainstream intellectual things, and they have some, they tend to be fairly loud personalities that, speak a little faster than they think, or like will
Yeah.
make claims that you're not quite sure of. But so one of them is this professor named Brett Weinstein, who was like an evolutionary theorist and had some drama at a college, and there was a whole thing. But they there was a discovery, or like a hypothesis that he came up with. This is the story. There's a bunch of drama about like who thought of it first and whatever. But the gist of it is basically the same thing you're talking about, but with lab mice. So the like there was, apparently, this is the story that I don't know the inside of because I've just heard this one podcast and I'm not in the evolutionary world, right? That it is apparently well known. You can check this for me, that like lab mice have incredibly long telomeres, like much longer than most other mice, and that it was presumed that it's just a thing that mice are, right? That like mice have long telomeres. We don't know why, but they do, and we deal with it. And then someone actually bothered to check, wait a second, is this lab mice or is this all mice? And it turns out that, wild type mice, their telomeres are just, they're just fine. They're normal length. But mice within laboratories, because they, they're selected early, similarly to this Drosophila thing, their telomeres have just grown without limit because it's prioritizing like, regeneration and like, productivity early on that you can breed the next generation. And they all die of cancer. Because there's no like age, there's no selection on like removing the like late aging effects, the problems with having super long telomeres that just mean you can replicate out of control. And so I don't know anything about like the dramas of who discovered what when and all these kinds of things, but I thought that was fascinating and potentially troubling for like that, and for all sorts of lab species. What have we done to these creatures?
Well, one of the lovely things about biology is that everything is related. And so all the time we use information that we gain from one species and apply it to another species. And as long as you understand the context in which something has evolved. So like you're not going to apply why whales have thick blubber to all mammals because it's specific to living underwater. But there are some things about whales that are still broadly applicable to all mammals or all animals or even all living things. And most lab animal researchers are very aware that their lab animals are very dissimilar to the wild animals from which they originated.
Right.
And so it's almost like thinking of them as a different species. So, okay, maybe lab mice do have longer telomeres than wild mice. But unless you're using lab mice to explain things about wild mice, that doesn't matter.
And like for drug tests, for example, you're going to start it in mice, but you will for sure try to do it in other species later on.
And for fruit flies, certainly we use them because they're easy. They are a model organism. And as I don't know who said, all models are wrong, but some are useful.
Right.
You start off with flies because they're easy. And then you're like, okay, that was an interesting thing we found. I wonder if that holds true in all of these other contexts. And so in the example of mice, you might be like, well, we found this in lab mice. I wonder if that's true. And the next place you look is in wild mice, because then if it holds true in lab mice and wild mice, it goes on. So yes, there are huge differences between the lab population and the wild population. Most of the times we're very aware of that. And when you are trying to apply lab findings to wild behavior, so for example, because I study behavior is so intrinsically linked to the ecology of the animal. So what is its life cycle? What is its environment? Who does it compete with? How does it struggle to reproduce? So the findings that I get from my lab flies might be applicable to wildflies and insects and more generally if the things that are controlling those adaptations haven't changed. So some things haven't changed, like they still need to digest yeast, they still need to find a mate, males still compete with each other, so some things haven't changed between lab and the wild. And so it's always the starting point. It's okay, we found this behavior. If we do, and sometimes you're like, okay, we've got this behavior, why does it happen? And you're like, oh, well, in the wild, this would be an explanation as to why. But you've always got to be aware that it's like, okay, that is using wild ecology to explain lab flies. It might
interesting.
be the case, but it might not, and vice versa. So you just always got to be very careful. And I think
of the mismatch.
The vast majority of scientists are very careful. When you get into the media, certainly you see, I don't know if you've seen the Twitter account,
in mice, just says in mice, yeah.
Yeah, and it's that thing of like, okay, we found it in mice. That doesn't automatically mean it's applicable to humans. It might be applicable to humans, but humans are a different species to mice. Some things are the same, some things are different.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you as a lab animal scientist, you're always very aware that there are differences between your lab animal and the wild thing.
Yeah.
But that in itself doesn't make the findings null and void. It just means that it's only applicable to that setting.
And it's anything that, like, if you have a control, like one of the great things about model organisms is if you know you have the same thing if you change a variable. If you're looking at differences.
Oh, bless you as a physicist.
Oh.
You think you can control all the variables.
Well, not all the variables, but at least you have the same
statistics.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why we do it, because in biology it's impossible to control everything. Like if we have an R squared, so a correlation coefficient of like 0.3, we're like, oh my God, this is revolutionary. Never has one variable explained so much variation. Whereas if you're a physicist, you're like, what do you mean it's less than 99.9% correlation? Like, what's going on here? What weren't you controlling? Because biology is essentially the study of variation. As my last live stream was on, I had an entire hour and 10 minutes just explaining the very basics of variation and why it's important to evolution. But it means it's very difficult to control things. So yeah, lab animals provide a setting where you can control things. And some lab animals are genetically identical. Like they are bred to not even be a species. That all animals are genetically identical. And so you really can start to control everything.
All right. I wish we like. I feel like
I've just been geeking out at you. It's like verbal.
Like here's my problem is that I want to ask you like 5 more questions, and we have 8 minutes left on the stream. And so I think I don't know. Do you want to do this again? Like, do you want to come back sometime?
I mean, basically, you're asking, do you want to have human interaction at a time when you're living on your own and have no human interaction and talk about really interesting topics? Hell yes.
Yes. Okay. Cool. I want to take at least one thing from, because I asked this discussion question on my Discord, like, hey, what are you confused about, or what are you excited about on of evolutionary theory? I think because you have said in your lectures and such that you're specialized in sex a little bit.
Yeah.
Lucille asked about what we know about the evolution of, as she put it, non-heterosexuality, and what, like, I don't know if you want to get into this. We have, we don't have that long, so maybe we can put it off to a different time. But
everyone asks me this as a gay biologist, and I just don't find it that interesting.
Okay.
I mean, partly it's because we don't know.
And that's what I've sort of figured. Like, here's what I know. It doesn't seem that it's chosen, and I don't know what else.
Homosexual behavior is very common across the animal kingdom. We have to say homosexual behavior because often you'll get male mating as well as male-female. Mm-hmm. We typically only look at male-male stuff because in a lot of animals, males have the more prominent mating displays. So it's very easy to see when a male is displaying to another male. It's quite hard to see when a female is, because females don't have the same displays.
Okay.
So if a female is attracted to another female, it's a lot harder to see, as is the case in the vast majority of biology. Female stuff just gets ignored. But it's just, we don't know a lot. There was a paper that came out maybe last year that didn't really do much except to reframe the question as why wouldn't we expect all animals to be bisexual?
Okay.
Why wouldn't we expect all animals to show mating behaviors towards both males and females?
Yeah.
And therefore the question to ask is not why is there homosexual behavior, but why is there so little homosexual behavior?
Like that's the kind of question that I would like to get beyond, because there's like this, for so long it was like this US based culture war of like we just have to get the ridiculous things out of the way. Like it's inhibitory for like the interesting questions. Like, okay, like if we look over lots of species, what are the correlations between like, you know,
and also since when did we care about what happens in nature as to human morals?
Yeah.
Like we as humans by and large think that homosexuality is fine and is a moral behavior, and just whether or not it happens in nature makes no real difference. For example, an entire chapter of my thesis is on cannibalism. Mm-hmm. Cannibalism is a super common behavior in the animal kingdom, but we don't shape our human morals and our human society on, oh, well, cannibalism happens in nature, therefore it's obviously natural and fine in humans.
It's so much of it is like, cultural baggage, right? It's like, what are the arguments right now that might convince the population, and here's how, like maybe we can frame it in this way to get people on board.
There are gay giraffes. Does that make them more likely to accept gay people? Okay, maybe, but that's a really lame, in terms of how to structure an argument. That's a really poor way to just do it because it's not harming anyone else. Just accept it for that reason.
Yeah, like it like it's kind of scary for me to go there, because like I'm aware that if like my actual moral position is that if homosexuality were 100% chosen, I also wouldn't care. But
yeah, exactly.
But the fact that if it were shown to be that, like, real people's lives would be affected, you know, or even if there were like a component of like upbringing or early childhood or like whatever it was, you can't open up those questions because there's all this cultural baggage of like if people get an inch, then all the old prejudices come back, and
I
it's
have
like,
seen
oh,
a
I
lot
was
of
right
articles
all the
on
time.
like, why are we so keen to find a gay gene?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't people be able to choose to be gay? Like there's probably genetics behind why some people are more musical than others. I mean, you've certainly got people who are genetically tone deaf, but also we bring up our children, some of them to be more musical than others.
Yeah.
And just because part of being musical is a choice doesn't mean that therefore being musical is bad or wrong or we should stop. Like,
but we've never had we've never
had
exactly
there's none of that
like,
baggage that comes with it.
Here's what.
So in answer to the question, there certainly in species that have two sexes, which is the majority of animal species, there is same-sex behavior across like hundreds of them across different branches of the tree. So it's widespread. The reasons why we don't have a very convincing theory for yet, I mean, partly it's why shouldn't they be?
Yeah, that is an interesting reframing. It's like
just like
it's like you would imagine that there is a possible range, and that your species will fall somewhere on that range.
Yeah, because basically
and you would need an immense amount of pressure
if you required too much energy so that I would only be performing mating behaviors with males, there's a chance that I could misidentify some males as females and therefore lower my own reproductive success by not engaging with males that I had misidentified as females. So the more narrow and strict your criteria about which individuals to mate with, the more likely you are to misidentify and miss out on mating opportunities. To put it in a purely biological terminology, it's like sometimes it's better to be a generalist and make type 2 errors than to make type 1 errors. I may have got those.
What's a type 2 error versus a type 1
so
error?
It's like Peter and the Wolf. Peter and the Wolf is first a type 1 error, then a type 2 error. So at first he cries wolf, but it's not. So it's a false positive.
Okay.
So that's a type 1. Then there was a wolf, but they didn't identify it as a wolf. So that's a type 2. So that's a false negative.
Okay.
So a type 1 error is when nothing is happening, but you think that something is. So that's what your p-value is for. Your 0.5% of the time, that will be the case.
Okay.
If you set p-value at 0.05. Your type 2 error is you failed to identify a real effect. Yeah. Basically, there's, and I mean, that's only in the species that have 2 sexes. There are plenty of species that have multiple sexes. There is sequential hermaphroditism. There is hermaphroditism based on temperature.
I was learning about clownfish a little while ago. Those are it's an interesting story.
It is. Fungi don't even have sexes per se. They have mating classes, and you can have like 120 mating classes within a species. Goodness. And as long as you're not mating within your own class, anything goes. So yeah, there's lots of sexual diversity in nature.
But
does that relate to humans? Who cares?
I would love to get, because I feel like we're stuck with framing it as like justifying the existence of homosexuality all the time, and like it would be so much more interesting if like people could lay off this is unjustified, and then you could like get into like the dynamics and
like from an evolutionary perspective, it is quite an interesting question to say, why do some animals choose this mating strategy over a different mating? Like if you just see them as alternate mating strategies, which happens all the time, it could be very interesting. But because there is so much baggage to it, it just puts you off even looking at the question.
Yeah.
And there are so many interesting questions that it's not like to not look at that question doesn't mean that there are no other good questions to look at.
Well, thank you. Thanks for indulging the question again.
That's all right.
I do feel for you getting the same question all the time. I imagine it gets annoying.
There are very few gay biologists on the internet.
Yeah.
In fact, there are very few queer scientists on the internet. So
I don't think Lucille. I'm not aware that Lucille knew that you were gay when she asked the question. I have no idea what she knew. Lucille, you can tell me in the chat if you were aware. But either way, it is. We are running over our time, and we still have to sing. We still have to sing a little bit. We got to sing about science.
You're not making me sing though, right? Because we worked out that there's a delay.
I gotta do the theme song.
Okay. There's a theme song.
You haven't stayed till the end of one of these streams, have you?
It's 10 p.m. I don't normally stay to stream this late.
There's most definitely a theme song. All right, we're gonna kick off the theme song right now. There we go. All right, let's get that bass. All right, and bring in the chords. There we go. All right. Oh yeah, get some reverb. Boom. We're gonna sing about science. We're gonna sing about science. Yeah, we're gonna sing about science. We're gonna sing about science. Yeah, we're gonna sing about science. We're gonna sing about science. Yeah, we're gonna sing about science. There we go. All right. We're gonna sing about science. Yeah, we're gonna sing about. Okay, what did we talk about today? We've got to do a recap of the lesson. We talked about fruit flies.
Physics doesn't make sense.
Physics. Hey, that's very mean. All right, let's see what we can do. Oh, you gotta give me some good evidence if you're gonna say that physics doesn't make no sense. Oh, you gotta go down to the equations and find the rubber sheet inside of you. You got things down at the very small, so small the big doesn't matter at all. If you see the equation, it's truth. And then you gotta go and get some proof. I know it's real hard put it in your brain. Mathematics you got to explain, and there's no intuitive way to understand. That's okay, you can still do physics again. We talk about science. Oh, we're gonna sing about science. Yeah, we're gonna sing about science. We're gonna sing about science. Yeah. Let's do one about fruit flies. Should we do fruit flies? What
Yeah.
do we learn about fruit flies?
Good luck with rhyming
yeah.
Drosophila melanogaster with something.
We got a species called Drosophila melanogaster. Oh, they breed much faster than anything else, 'cause we use them for that purpose. Yeah. We put them in a lab in cages made of plastic. Oh, their breeding rate is frantic. They are put inside and then we kill them off. 15 days, oh yeah, it is very strange. We're putting them in a plastic city. Oh, does it describe nature? We don't know, but it's still pretty. You get to look about their sexual behaviors. I don't really know what else. We didn't get to that. We spent so long on fruit flies and why they're not like wild fruit flies, but I don't know what else to say. We gotta come back,
talking about
Sally.
French and pianos and violins, to be honest.
Oui, je peux parler, chanter en français. No, à le UK, on a beaucoup d'anglais. I got nothing. Oh, then we talked a little about homosexuality. Yeah, Sally's kind of tired of the questions, but we still gotta be educating the public. Maybe eventually it'll just be another topic of usual research, but until then, we'll see how it goes. I got no rhyme for research. What rhymes with research? No, we gotta sing about science. Oh, we're gonna sing about science. Maybe perch. We're gonna sing about science. I got nothing.
You're the rhyming guy here, not me.
I know. Oh, it doesn't work. All right, Sally, thanks for coming on the stream today.
Thank you for having me.
You need to come back because we haven't talked enough about.
We haven't
all the
even
things.
scratched the surface.
No, not at all. Lurch, we could do. Okay, lurch, perch, things that rhyme with. But like, you need a good 2-syllable rhyme, don't you, for research? It's
On
like,
a bird on a tree perch.
tree perch, knee.
But we would in Britain we say
works.
research, not research.
Research. Do we do the rolled R? Research.
Oh no, we don't roll our R's that much.
No, we're not quite. That's too posh even for you. All right. In the chat, tell us who you are so I can shout you out. Just at the end of this, we got Beaker Rocket, Radoslava Bunarova. Thanks for sticking around, guys. Ewa Jessic, Catherine Rose goes here. Jake I, Carrie Adams, Ann Smith is here as usual. We got Alice, the Mamguzians back. Chino Hoshi, thanks for sticking here. Valdemar Burning Hansen is here again. Jamil Zalmat, Silverifications. Hello, hi. Bye.
Thanks for being such nice people in the comments. I've been keeping an eye on the comments, and they've been really lovely.
Did you find any particular ones that you really liked?
Oh man, there were just lots of them on topic, which you can never be sure of in a live stream.
Yeah, my audience is small but caring. So far, like the Discord's been really pleasant too so far, which is surprising. I've heard for a Discord.
I'm not cool enough to use Discord.
It's been 2 weeks for me. I'll see how it goes. We got Ann Smith, Memguzian, Jamil Zaimat, Silverifications, Non-Euclidean Dreamer, Mary Mead, Sven Kunz, Andres Guzman, Sergio Best, Same Koja. No offense though. Imagine 4 says 10 on 10 song. Thank you, Imagine 4. Johann von Forstner, Lyrical, the Frisian Atypical Reader, A.A. Bowser, Gumbledolf, Manuel Bonnet, Saptarshi Purkas. I do so badly at any name that isn't like English.
Or French.
So, yeah, Saptarshi Purkayasta. I'll work on that, Saptarshi. Jan Hoffman.
Is that
Yeah.
The Langford name?
That is.
Malay name?
I am not sure.
Takayasa.
Perkayasta? I don't know. Subtashi, let us know where you're from. I probably read it at the top at one point, but I forgot. So, until next time, thanks Sally for coming along.
Anytime.
We can keep chatting a bit after we end the stream if you wish, if you want to stick around. But right now we're gonna end it. Signing off, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. We'll be back tomorrow for another solo show. On Friday we've got Tirzu is coming on. So unfortunately I don't think you're gonna get to see his face, but you will hear his voice. He's not doing a face reveal yet. Until then, conversation continues down the Discord, and watch the past streams if you want. Sign up for our folding at home team, because we've got like 6 million points now, and we've done like 500 work units, which is pretty sweet. Stay safe, be alert, not anxious. See you guys tomorrow.